Revenge with Amelia? That's what this is. And today's flavor? Watching a paper crown prince stumble in front of the only people who mattered. Take your 2 weeks and go quietly, Travis said, puffed up like the CEO's nephew had just been promoted to Emperor of the Free World. He said it loud, too, like he was announcing raffle winners at Chili's Trivia Night 28 years old. All jawline, no substance. He leaned back in that leather chair like he'd just solved capitalism. The acquisition committee? They didn't clap. They didn't even nod. They stared at him the way you stare at a raccoon that somehow found its way into a golf cart, confused, appalled, a little curious how it's going to crash. One guy with a Rolex scribbled furiously into his folder. Another, casual as breathing, angled his phone camera. Recording. I didn't argue. Didn't flinch. I smiled. That smile you give when you've been watching a car crash in slow motion while everyone else swears it's a parade. Travis thought he'd finally made his move. Thought he'd handled me. The woman who spent 8 years building the backbone of Core Sentry from scratch. What he didn't know, what made the buyer's side eyes so damn sweet, was that the 2 weeks he'd just granted me were going to be the last 2 weeks he'd ever sit in a room like this. If he was lucky, they'd let him keep his badge long enough to use the bathroom indoors. Quick pause, mid-chaos. If you're rage jogging through your HOA right now, or scrubbing plates at 11 p.m. like they insulted your mother, and you haven't subscribed yet, do it. Helps us keep the lights on. And hitting like lets the algorithm know Carol's not the only one who enjoys her revenge, served cold and professional. Anyway. To Travis, this was his grand finale. He strutted in with his two-type blazer, cologne like chemical warfare, flanked by a junior HR rep and a strategic transformation consultant. Translation: frat buddy with a LinkedIn premium trial. Behind him, his PowerPoint sat frozen on a title slide, Core Sentry 2.0, streamlined, synergized, savage. I wish I were making that up. The buyers, Nordell Systems, 4 of them flown in from Chicago, sat like poker players with full hands and no tells. These weren't casual execs. They were the type who could smell operational rot faster than mold in a walk-in fridge. And Travis? Travis was rot in a tie. Carol's been a huge part of our legacy team, he said. Doing that thing men do where they pretend to honor a woman while shoving her career off a cliff. But we're moving in a new direction. Lean, agile, aggressive. She'll be stepping down after a brief transition period. 2 weeks should be plenty. He never even looked at me. Just kept talking like I'd already been erased. But here's what he didn't know. For 2 months, I'd been quietly working with Nordell's due diligence team. Not for revenge. Not even for relevance. Just because when the old CEO walked out with no warning and Travis waltzed in with his mug that said world's okayest leader, someone had to keep the company from collapsing before the ink dried. So I answered their questions. I cleaned up his tantrums, rescheduled the vendor audits he canceled by accident. When Nordell's VP of Integration asked me to flag structural risks, I didn't gossip. I just forwarded the right emails, attached the right docs, highlighted the right names. Quiet, precise, surgical. Meanwhile, Travis couldn't help himself. Copied buyers on memos where he claimed credit for 6-month plans I'd built. Kicked me out of briefings and bragged about it. And now here he was, staging my farewell like I was a summer intern who overstayed karaoke night. I glanced across the table at Nordell's CEO. He hadn't blinked once. Hands folded neatly on the binder in front of him. And there it was, a yellow sticky note peeking out of page 14. My fuse. My insurance? My signature, already in their hands. Travis thought this was the ending. What he didn't know was that it was already the beginning of his last chapter. Case closed? Not even close. Because sometimes corporate wars aren't won in boardrooms, they're won in footnotes, in CCs. In the quiet corners of a staffing draft, no one reads until it's too damn late. Travis's first royal decree, fresh off his TikTok MBA, was to rebrand the company with fonts he thought looked fresh. Then he yanked me off every cross-functional call. Ops shouldn't be in strategy, he declared. brimming with the confidence of a man who once failed intro to microeconomics, twice. I didn't fight. Just sipped my lukewarm coffee, nodded like the tired old guard, and tagged every cancellation email blood red. Then came Bryce, his frat buddy. Director of Strategic Transformation, whatever that meant. He arrived with a standing desk, a gimbal for Zooms, and a whiteboard covered in words like disruptive, scalable, and synerge. Charisma of expired lunch meat. Within days, things cracked. Vendor payments froze because Bryce optimized compliance out of the invoicing queue. A supplier stormed into HQ threatening to repossess leased equipment. I tried explaining to Travis that we were circling the drain. He cut me off mid-sentence. Carol, maybe if you focused less on being alarmist and more on being adaptive, this wouldn't be a problem. You're just ops. Let strategy handle the big stuff. Just ops. Never mind the contract renewal pipeline that kept licenses alive. Never mind the 5 escalations I'd fixed that week while Bryce played pretend. So I went quiet. Stopped patching leaks. Stopped saving them before the collapse. And instead, I mapped it all, step by step, like watching a bridge buckle in slow motion, and buckle it did. A 3-year logistics deal slipped because Bryce missed a renewal deadline. Buyers flagged it immediately. Finance panicked, pinged me for backups. Of course I had them. I'd built the failover list months ago. I slid it over quietly, no CC to Travis. The buyers noticed. That night, Maya, the VP of integration at Nordell, sent me 6 words. You okay? Just checking on you, and that's when calculation kicked in. My silence was louder than Travis's noise. I wrote back, yes, but you might want to request page 14, paragraph 3E in the staffing agreement. Paragraph 3E. The line Travis had signed without reading. The line that gave sole veto power over staffing transitions to one role, the continuity lead. The role still blank. Not for long. The first briefing happened almost by accident. A Zoom call Travis skipped because of delegate fatigue. The buyers asked about vendor metrics. Travis froze, glassy-eyed. I answered. Clear, direct, precise. Silence. Then, thanks. That's helpful. After the call came another message. This time not from Travis, not even from our execs, but Nordell's integration office. Would you be open to a short side-channel meeting regarding continuity risks? I said yes. 1 call turned into 3. 3 turned into reviews. By the 3rd, they weren't chatting. They were planning. And then came the question, if there were an ideal role for you post-close, to minimize risk, what would it be? I didn't hesitate. Interim COO, Transition Americas. Not a throne. Just the bridge, until the storm passed. 2 days later, a document arrived. Internal only. Transition staffing notes. My name. Box checked. Meanwhile, Travis was busy handing out kombucha at Transformation Thursday, sketching flowcharts with beanbags and buzzwords, asking finance why cash flow didn't just mean more sales. He had no clue. Not about the calls. Not about the clause. Not about the battlefield he was losing one unanswered question at a time. And then came his rocket announcement. Big win. Migrated compliance workflows to a leaner SaaS stack. Faster, cheaper, smarter. Let's disrupt legacy. He actually wrote Disrupt Legacy about the system holding our legal docs and regulatory audits for a $600 million acquisition. Within an hour, my inbox was fire. Legal flagged sync failures. Procurement locked out. Vendors frozen. A chatbot named Savvy answering every question with, I'm still learning. And then the real hit. 5 critical vendors suspended. 1 threatening legal action if onboarding wasn't fixed by end of day. Where was Travis? Hosting his kombucha circus. By the time he waddled into the war room, finance was mid-aneurysm. Minor hiccup. He grinned. Like a man who'd just rear-ended a semi and called it parallel parking. That last line wasn't an accident, it was a breadcrumb. HR doesn't pre-write survival notes unless someone upstairs has already decided who's worth keeping. Travis was still grinning his way through smoothie stains and synergy slogans. Blissfully unaware that the walls were already closing in, He thought the banners, the t-shirts, the chants were the story. He thought his PowerPoint font experiment was legacy-defining. But the real story was sitting in a 73-page contract, page 14, paragraph 3E, where his own signature had welded the lock shut. He'd given me sole authority over continuity staffing. He didn't know he'd handed me the detonator. The invite change, post-close executive realignment, wasn't just corporate jargon. It was a countdown. And the draft HR note with continued impact wasn't a farewell. It was a coronation, written in plain English so soft it cut sharper than any blade. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the hum of 1,000 fluorescent lights, and thought about the irony. He spent weeks erasing my name from invites. Now, in the one meeting that mattered, mine was the only one that carried weight. Tomorrow wasn't about negotiation anymore. It wasn't about surviving his tantrums, his frat boy management cosplay, his AI plug-and-play disasters. Tomorrow was about unveiling the inevitable. Travis had been a placeholder. I was the permanence. And the thing about placeholders? They're disposable. He strutted in like a king without a crown, chest puffed, tie strangling his own neck, convinced the spotlight was his. But the room wasn't built for him. Not the mahogany table, not the legal binders, not the silence heavy enough to bend the air. Travis opened with swagger. Thank yous, buzzwords, my name tossed in like garnish before his scripted farewell. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks and I was gone. Bryce clapped like a wind-up toy. HR nodded. Nordell's executives didn't blink. I didn't argue. I just reached into my bag and slid one card across the table. Matta black, white ink, clean font. Carol R. Ellis, Interim COO, Transition Operations, Nordell Systems. That was the crack. The buyer CEO's laughter cut sharp through the room, not cruel, delighted. Like he'd been waiting for the punchline. A binder opened. A sticky note flipped. Page 14, paragraph 3E. The fuse I'd been sitting on for weeks, glowing now in front of everyone. Maya's voice landed calm, final. She represents the transition leadership. That was agreed legally. With your signature, Mr. Harrison. Travis went pale, tried to claw back ground. This isn't binding. She's not. She can't be. The CEO slid the page toward him, finger tapping the line where his name bled black into permanence. His signature, his trap, and then the sentence that hollowed him out. All final approvals fall to the continuity lead, Carol R. Ellis. The room stayed still, except for Travis, gaping like a man discovering gravity too late. Bryce slipped out. HR stared at the table grain. Legal didn't even flinch. The CEO didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. So about your 2 weeks, Travis. Kansas City. Facility ops? Forklift scheduling. Nights. No one laughed. No one had to. I stood, took the envelope, clipped on the Nordell badge that had been waiting for me all along. The click of the clasp was louder than his whole speech. Thank you all, I said, steady, already moving toward the door. Behind me, his voice cracked, a boy's plea in a man's suit. Wait, she reports to you? The CEO smiled, slow and precise. No, she is me, for the next 90 days, and that was it. I walked out, left him drowning in the ruins of his make-believe empire, swallowed whole by the one thing he never thought he'd face: consequence.